Hey guys, and welcome to my new series about the Dutch East Indies. This series is going to be quite controversial because the city we're going to build is part of a colonial empire. And I see it as my job that we do not glorify empire or colonialism. However, I don't want to shy away from the topics either. I recognize that hundreds of thousands of Indonesians lost their lives because of Dutch colonialism. And I understand that Indonesian people find it offensive that a Dutch person like myself is trying to recreate something they feel really strong about. However, I hope that this project does justice to history. On the topic, let's first start explaining what the Dutch East Indies were. The Dutch East Indies, a colonial territory that is now present-day Indonesia, emerged from the nationalized trading post of the Dutch East India Company. This transition occurred in the 1800s, when these trading posts came under the admission of the Dutch government. The Dutch engaged in numerous wars with local rulers and expanded their territory, leading in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. Meanwhile, the Netherlands established itself as a major player on the global spice market, accumulating enormous wealth at the expense of the local Indonesian population. The colonial social structure was inherently racial, with the Dutch elites living separately from the local Indonesians. In the mid-19th century, the cultivation system was enforced, compelling Indonesian farmers to surrender 1/5 of their crop to the state. The term Indonesia was first used for the region after 1880. In the early 20th century, local intellectuals envisioned Indonesia as a national state, paving the way for the independence movement. The Japanese invasion in 1941 abruptly halted the Dutch rule. Post-1945, the Dutch attempted to regain control over their colonies, but the Indonesian population, led by Sukarno, sought independence. This resulted in a series of bloody campaigns by the Dutch government to try and stop this from happening. But under international pressure, the Dutch halted their efforts, ultimately resulting in Indonesia becoming independent in 1949. Hey guys, and welcome to the first episode of this new project. As you see, I'm building this really basic layout of what's gonna be, well, at least a small town. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to build a full city because there's just not that much to be found about this period in Dutch history. Well, there is some, but online you have to go through really sketchy, complicated archives, and I do have loads of images of residential housing, but city layouts are quite rare because it's often older colonial cities which are being modernized, and there's never really been a, well, at least not in the 20s and 30s, which is this project is of course set because, well, it's a Jass build and it's always in the 30s. But there are no real plans of how to build a new city or of some sorts. I thought I'd start out why. Why am I building this area? Well, I explained in the history lesson, of course, that I find it very important as these topics are still being talked about and not forgotten. But there's also a really cool part about this project, which is the architecture in the Dutch East Indies. It was very Art Deco, very modernist, and some really big architecture names and firms worked on projects in the Dutch East Indies. And they were really, before the war, actually, they had big plans of remodeling and really making it future-proof. And so yeah, I really like that in combination with some more colonial style, and yeah, there's just there's some cool things to be built, and also the whole topic with racial segregation. That's a hard word for a Dutch person. Often local people would live in so-called kampongs, and these are really just slums, but I found loads of documents of these slums being modernized and actually get public bathrooms, public water, like showers and that kind of stuff. They're really trying to improve it. I don't know in what, well, how big these efforts were. I think it wasn't that big, but at least it's an interesting topic to to do. And I really just like this Dutch architecture in the tropics. So this gives way to loads of cool assets which I can create on the workshop. And the first asset you'll see is the one right now being built. It is a hotel. The original you can see here in the middle screen on the right side, and I think it is in Batavia. It has a large front porch, making it a colonial style building. Opposite of this is how I envision the main street. As you can see, the building on the corner is very modern, it's very art deco. There's light rail, there are cars, and the streets are just buzzing. And I really am trying to envision some lively main street where everything is happening like it was back in the 20s and the 30s. So that's gonna be my first objective. Luckily for me, there's also a lot of Latin American buildings which kind of resembles this building style, so I can use those. The assets I just placed are actually quite new on the workshop. I think they released last week and they turned out to be exactly what I needed for the main street. So big thank you to Catanium for uploading this great assets. And talking about assets, Viocra is the only one on the workshop right now making Dutch East Indies assets. However, a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago, I already envisioned this project. So I tried to create some assets. I think I ended up at about 5 or 6, and then I gave up realizing how much of an effort it's gonna be. So I already have those, and I added about 4 or 5 last couple of days. So there's plenty of choice for me to start the series right now. Enough at least to make a small village. So and I can use some Chinese and some Thai and some other Indonesian assets which are also on the workshop. So yeah, the most important stuff I do have, but there's gonna be way more and way more assets incoming for this project. If you want early access to these assets, you can always support me on Patreon. Those people will get early access on the assets, the videos and all other stuff. You can do it for the assets, but you can also do it to support me in this project, because it is quite of a daunting project. It takes lots of time. Also to get all the facts straight and to make sure I don't mess up. Because my biggest fear is that I say something or do something which will insult a whole generation of people. Living on the edge. Anyways, as you see on the screen right now, I am adding some details. This is just the first corner of the build, of course. Off screen, I added a tram line on the other side, the opposite side of the road. Without catenaries, or catenaries, I never knew how to say that, but because it's going to be diesel trams. And luckily the ones I added to the workshop were also used in the Dutch East Indies, so they're going to be a tram. But that's for a later episode, and adding tram rails is really finicky, so I skipped that one. Basically for your viewing pleasure. Here I'm just changing up some buildings with PO. I also made a set of custom roofs, so I can replace them, so all the colors kinda look the same, because I always hate it when I have like 10 types of orange roofs. Which, in fairness, is quite realistic, but some buildings just need a little bit of a better roof. And it adds just that little bit of detail on the build. And with that, we are already reaching the end of the first episode. So I hope you all enjoyed. It is a bit of a history lesson to start off with, but we needed to start it somewhere, and I think it was very important that we talked about these subjects. Anyways, guys, if you haven't done yet, like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot, you know the drill. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next episode. This was Jass. Bye.